he did get a really nice deal for Badfinger. They signed with Warner Brothers. He'd become their manager by that point, and he negotiated, it was like 4 or 5 albums that they were going to owe Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers were going to pay total like $250,000, which was a pretty big deal for records back then. And then they were going to make commissions and royalties on top of that. And it was put into an escrow account. And unfortunately, Stan Polly controlled the escrow account. And he didn't let any money to speak of flow to Badfinger. That's why they were like sleeping. They had like a van and a station wagon, as I recall. They were sleeping in their vehicles because they couldn't afford motel rooms. They were washing their clothes in gas station men's room, and the sink in the men's room in the gas station.
You're listening to Quorum Radio.
On Quorum Radio, we're going to be talking with a musician, Steve Pavey, who back at the time in the early 70s, when he was a teen drummer with the band Images, was the warm-up act for Badfinger as they toured the United States for a period of about 30 to 45 days. And it was during this time, under very precarious conditions, that Badfinger's Pete Ham met the beautiful young American singer, Dixie Armstrong, who later became the inspiration for the Badfinger mega hit, Baby Blue. On next, folks, after the music, you're listening to Quorum Global Radio.
Yes, I got what I deserve. Kept you waiting there too long, my love. All that time without a word. Didn't know you think that I'd forget, or I'd regret. Special love I had for you. Baby blue. All the days became so long. Did you really think I'd do you wrong? Dixie, when I let you go, thought you'd realize I would know, I would show special love I have for you. Baby blue. What can I do? What can I say? Except I want you by my side. How can I show me the way? Don't you know time to try? Guess that's all I have to say. Set the feeling just grows stronger every day. So just one thing before I go. Take good care, baby, let me know. Let it grow.
So, Acorn Radio is on with somebody who's got some fascinating anecdotes, Steve Pavey. He's somebody who is with the band, Revenant, and that was formed about, 15 years ago, Steve?
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, prior to that, to Revenant, you were with another band or other bands that, plural, that you were touring with around the United States. So, how long have you been a performing musician?
Well, I started playing drums when I was 7. I started playing drums where I made money at it as a actual paid musician when I was 12. Though I wasn't getting paid much. We were just playing like little block party kind of things and making maybe $5 or $10 a piece, or sometimes $5 or $10 for the entire band. And by the time I was 15, I was spending my summers when the school season was out, playing in bands and touring basically throughout the Midwest at that point.
What time period is this roughly, Steve?
That was between like 1969 and 1972.
Right. So then, and you're a drummer. Did you play other instruments as well?
Just drums and percussion, drums, congas, timbales. If it was something I could beat on and make a boom boom, I'd beat on it and make a boom boom sound.
Great. So let me ask you a question. There was a time when you were touring the Midwest when you were appearing together with Badfinger. When was that roughly?
They were on the Midwestern branch of their tour, and that was an interesting time for a number of reasons.
How old were you at that time, Steve? Quickly,
at that time, I was like 16.
Okay, so in the early 70s when you ran into Badfinger?
Yeah, that would have been right about 1971, thereabouts.
Wow. So you said it was interesting for a couple of reasons. I cut you off recently. I just wanted to get an idea of when that was. Sorry about that. So
yeah, that was
tell us about
the Stone Age really. But that was kind of an interesting time because you're talking about, my band was a 4-piece band, 2 guitars, bass and drums. Badfinger was a 4-piece band, but they did more than just 2 guitars, bass, and drums. They sometimes had guitar, keyboards, bass, and drums, and sometimes 2 guitars, bass, and drums, depending on what they were playing. And they were a British band where we were Americans, so we had a little bit of a cultural thing going on where a lot of the time we were both speaking English, but we weren't always understanding each other. Put it that way.
Well, at that time, what was your band? Yeah, British slang is not American slang.
Yeah, British slang is not even close to American slang, and you're American, you're likely to not understand it. And British humor, as I found out too, is very, very dry. You don't always know when someone is making a joke and when someone is serious because they're very deadpan. So
sure.
But the name of the band back then was Images, and that was kind of like a Revenant in a way, really. It was a band that had a lot of people in and out of it at different times. So,
right.
And then it ended up lasting until like 1972, and then it was done simply because everybody was out of high school. Everybody was worrying about getting drafted because Vietnam was going on. You couldn't get a deferment because you were a musician. So I ended up joining the Air Force after a while because I was worried about getting drafted. And I figured it'd be safer in the Air Force than the Army. And then right after that, Kissinger came out and said they've been having private peace talks, secret peace talks. Nobody's going over to Vietnam anymore. So that you couldn't have said that 2 weeks ago.
Well, you got to serve your country. That's great. So, tell me, what was it like back at that point with Images touring the country, doing gigs? What were you making? I can ask you kind of personal, maybe it's too nosy of a question. What kind of money were you making every night doing that?
We were probably averaging, I gotta say, about probably about $300, maybe $400 a week.
Per minute.
Per person. Yeah, we were. You could actually make some money back then compared to now. It's really hard to make money as a musician in the 21st century. The way turned out with streaming and everything else. When you've got a major band like Journey, where they have 1 million streams and they get paid $10,000 total for 1 million streams, that's pathetic. Back of course, then you could actually make some money, though you weren't really. It was harder to make money playing live back then compared to now, because now that's how you make your money. You play live, you sell merchandise, and you make money off the T-shirts because nobody's buying like records anymore. Back then, of course, it was the exact opposite. You made, if you were lucky, you broke even, or maybe even made a little bit of a profit from touring. But touring back then was designed to basically just expose people to what you were doing, so they'd go out and they'd buy the records. And then you made money off the records from basically royalties from the record sales.
So, right. And so then on a day-to-day basis, you guys were playing like how many hours a day?
Oh, that would vary really. The actual gigs that we were doing were probably about 30 to 45 minutes per gig, per show.
And you do several shows.
Yeah, we do as much as 2 or sometimes even 3 shows in a day, and sometimes only 1. And sometimes there'd be a day where we wouldn't be doing any shows at all. Usually, though, on those days, we were traveling to do more shows. So it was like you didn't really have a day off, because when you weren't playing, you were usually traveling from point A to point B and then getting set up to play the show, because we didn't have roadies. I shouldn't say
so that
point about 3 months, but mostly we didn't have roadies, so we had to do it ourselves.
Yeah, so it was basically something. It was a lot of work, and so tell us about basically living on the road. What was that like? And by the way, how long were you kind of like playing, I guess, parallel to Badfinger? How long did that happen? Like a couple of months, or?
Badfinger, probably, I'd say about maybe 30 to 45 days, thereabout. Not a long time, but long enough to get a little bit of a feel for what they were going through, because it was pathetic. They were extremely talented. They loved playing music, to put it mildly. But like most musicians, they hated the business side of things. And the manager that they had, he was kind of connected with like the mob. At least that was the word that was going around with a lot of people. He had mob connection. He had connection to Alan Klein, who was I shouldn't say the Beatles manager, but he was the manager for 3 out of the 4 Beatles. He was the one that was responsible actually for the Beatles breaking up. So the kind of connections that he had weren't the most savory. And
yeah, sure.
He did get a really nice deal for Badfinger. When Badfinger left Apple, they signed with Warner Brothers. He'd become their manager by that point, and he negotiated, it was like 4 or 5 albums that they were going to owe Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers were going to pay total like $250,000, which was a pretty big deal for records back then. They were.
You mean per album, Steve?
No, that was back then. That was for the entire thing. As far as recording it. Yeah, that was for the entire deal to record 4 albums, and then they were going to make commissions and royalties on top of that. But the $200,000 was just an upfront payment for the records, and it was put into an escrow account. And unfortunately, Stan Polly controlled the escrow account. And he didn't let any money to speak of flow to Badfinger. I mean, they were making like $30 a day per diem.
What?
And that was for all 4 old members total, $30. Their per diem while they were on the road was like $30 a day for the entire band.
That doesn't cover wages, that covers just food or lodging?
That was their total per diem.
So they were making like, this is like hard to understand. I mean, by the way, at that point, Steve,
that's why they were like sleeping in, they had like a van and a station wagon, as I recall. They were sleeping in their vehicles because they couldn't afford motel rooms. They were washing their clothes in gas station men's room, and the sink in the men's room in the gas station.
Oh, wow.
Because
it's unbelievable.
Afford anything. Charles said any kind of money at the end was like pulling teeth.
So these guys, they were being paid, like 4 members of Badfinger, okay, were getting a per diem of $30. That's like $7.50 per man, and they're 4 members at that time, right?
Yep.
How do they survive?
They were. Well, with White Castle, which we introduced them to, White Castle was what we called Greaseburger. Because White Castle, we called it Greaseburger as opposed to Greaseburger Deluxe. Greaseburger Deluxe was like McDonald's, Burger King, stuff like that, where it was more expensive. White Castle was extremely inexpensive. It was and still is a chain of restaurants in the Midwest where you could buy like 10 hamburgers for $1. 10 little slider hamburgers for $1. You could buy 15 little slider cheeseburgers for $1.50. 15 little like slider cheeseburgers, little miniature cheeseburgers for like $1.50 for 15 of them.
Oh my God.
Or for 10 of them, I should say. So
wow,
for very little money, you could eat. You weren't eating well, but you were at least eating. You could at least fill your stomach. And we introduced him to White Castle, and that was how they survived on the Midwest on their tour. We just
That's
White Castle.
amazing. That's amazing. I mean, by the way, they were there during the summer when you were there. You were with them, working alongside for 45 days in the summer or winter or what?
Yeah, no, in the summer. You didn't really tour in the winter. There were some people maybe that did, I guess, but pretty much everybody I knew, the touring was done generally between like May and September. In our case, it was more like June, July, and August.
What did they say about White Castle? Did they give you any opinion?
I liked White Castle. I especially liked the money that White Castle cost compared to like every place else. The thing though is, if someone had told us back then that 20 or 30, 40 years down the line,
What's that? I missed
White
what you said.
Castle would be a gourmet frozen food in the supermarkets, I would have been like, you're nuts. What you been smoking? Give me some of that. And yet, here we are today, where in like Colorado, where I live, there are no White Castle restaurants. But there are frozen White Castle hamburgers where they're like $10 for 10 White Castle hamburgers. For like 10 of them, 8 or 10 of them. The stuff
That's amazing.
The stuff that we used to spend, and from what I understand, back in the Midwest, if you walk into a White Castle, you're still only going to spend $2 or $3 for like 10 of their little sliders. And
amazing.
In Colorado, you're going to spend $10 for 10 little slider frozen White Castles. And
So
it's like, not for me, spending that much.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So what what did Badfinger do? How did Badfinger's members like White Castles, or was like, I guess it's better than starvation, right?
Well, I imagine they probably looked at it along the lines like it's better than starvation, but I think they also developed a taste for them pretty quickly. It was like, oh, this is all right.
Yeah, sure. So then, what do they do for breakfast? They just had the leftovers from last night, or what?
Well, you didn't really have breakfast when you're on the road as a musician, because a lot of the time, if you were lucky enough to get any sleep at all, you slept through like breakfast. You had lunch, you had dinner, and breakfast, if you were lucky at all, if you were lucky enough to eat a third meal, it was an afterthought.
So, let me understand something about that moment in their career. You have a better handle on this, I'm sure, than I do. But at that point, had they released any really big hits, or they were just starting to get famous?
Yeah, they had like No Matter What was a big hit at that point. Come and Get It was a big hit at that point, which was written. Come and Get It was written for them by Paul McCartney. The reason why Paul McCartney gave them that song, because originally it was going to be a Beatles song, they had signed with Apple and then promptly been ignored. So they had done a interview with one of the local, I think it was the New Music Express, but I'm not sure. But they'd done an interview where they were basically talking about how, we signed with Apple, and ever since then, we haven't done anything. We've been ignored. So McCartney saw the interview and thought, oh, this makes us look bad. He called and said, I got a song for you. Play it this way, sing it this way. He produced it for them. It was their first hit.
He's an amazing guy.
He is. Well, he's an incredible songwriter. He's kind of a complex guy. And I don't really know him at all. I've never met him, but people that I know that have met him have told me that he's much more complicated than he appears on the surface. Which that's usually the way it is for most musicians when they get up to that particular point in the stratosphere. You know, when you're seeing a whole lot of people that want stuff from you, you're kind of guarded.
Had they, by the way, at that point when you were like dealing with them over that 30 or 45 day span, Steve, had they produced the song that that Nielsen made famous? Was "Without You"? Or is that later?
That they had that song at the time. Trying to think if they'd. I don't think it was ever on the radio or anything, though. Actually, with them, and it was a much different kind of feel the way they did it compared to the way Nielsen did it. They did it more as like a kind of a guitar-driven rocker. It wasn't really the ballad that people think of with Nielsen when they did it.
Oh no! What a difference! Yeah, he made it such
kind of song. I mean, it was like, well, I can't forget this evening, all your faith that you were leaving, but I guess that's just the way the story goes. So it was a lot faster the way they did it, but it was cool. It was just different than the way that Nielsen did it.
Yeah, supposedly Nielsen. What's that?
Well, one of the a friend of mine that she was in Denver for a while, where I live, and then she went to L.A. and she started hanging out quite a bit with Richard Perry when he was still alive. He was the producer for Harry Nilsson. He told her that Harry didn't want to record the song to begin with. I mean, first of all, it wasn't one of his songs. So he didn't want to record a cover of someone else's song. Right. And then he didn't especially like the way that it ended up being arranged and everything, with the big production and all that. The thing he especially didn't like, though, he didn't like that people were coming up to him and saying things like, "Harry, that's the best song that you've ever written." It was like, I didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it. Gosh. The Duke made me do it.
Oh my gosh! You know, I mean, I think it's just astonishing. That reminds me of I can't remember the tune. It's Linda Ronstadt made it like a killer song that Mike Naismith of the Monkees had written.
Different drum.
Different drum. What an amazing song she just took it out of the park, man. And that's true. I mean, there's a certain talent that somebody has. It's a little bit like that brings it to a like incredibly high level that just in and of itself is just magnificent talent to transform it into something unforgettable. But you know, the
people, a lot of people are known for songs where if you don't know and you think they wrote them, and then you get surprised to find that they didn't. The music industry and the way that people perceive it is really interesting, because they'll see something, they'll think, wow, that's the best song that person ever wrote. And then they find out later on that they never wrote it. Someone else wrote it. And I mean, sometimes someone else wrote it in the band. And you'd think, well, if they wrote it, how come they didn't sing it? Because they decided somebody else was better at singing it. So they said, hey, you sing this. Or you'll have someone, for that matter, where they write a song. It's very, very popular. They have to do it every night for months on the road because it's what people want to hear. they get sick of it. Their own song. It's like, how can you get sick of your own song? Easy. Try doing it night after night for like 6 months or 9 months.
So, Steve, just going back to Badfinger. So, what was the dynamic like in that band? There was so much turmoil in that band. What did you see? Well, you were kind of a witness to rock music history by having that window on their work as musicians and their interaction. What did you see? Did you get any sense of anything?
Personality-wise, at that point, they got along very well. Later, as the money issues started becoming a big thing, and credits started to become a big thing as far as like who was going to get credited for what and make some money from it that way. Things changed. But early on, they were like four guys that just wanted to play music. My band was decent. They were phenomenal. Part of the problem too, because like the original video that I commented on, they talked in that video about how Stan Polly had never really seen any real consequences from his action. And part of the reason for that was because they couldn't prove what happened to the money. He had access to it, but they couldn't prove who had authorized what as far as transfers of money from point A to point B. So by the time they ended up catching up to him, most of the money was totally gone anyway.
Unbelievable.
And
What a swindle.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. And by the way, the clubs that you guys would go to, it was all like arenas or nightclubs or what? Well, you went Badfinger.
It was a combination, really, of it was mostly bigger clubs. We did we weren't really doing much in the way of like any kind of arena type plays at that point, at that time. Arenas weren't really a big thing for most people. They were more like larger clubs, like like there was the Forum in L.A. That was a bigger. That was more of an arena type thing, I think. That was probably, that was big enough that they had like thousands of people that could fit in with the Forum. But most places, it was more like between 500 and 1,500 people, maybe.
Wow. So then, right. And so one of the things that stood out to me when we spoke and I asked you about what you guys were making, this is like when you were 16 or 17, right, Steve?
Yeah.
You're like a young high school kid.
I was making really good money back then.
You were making like $300 a week. Just you, right?
Yeah.
And so
sometimes
the other bandmates
more than
were
that.
also making. What's that?
And sometimes more than that.
Yeah, so $300 to $400 for each member of your band Images was making that. It's amazing. So the thing that stands out for
back then, people were going out a lot more than they are now.
Oh yeah, everybody expected live music, right?
Yeah.
So this is just like this is like so stunning because here we are. This is around the time when Badfinger is starting to produce some of their initial big hits, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they they had Without You, but that was like before it really got a lot of radio play, and Nilsson found out about it. Then he did it as a cover, but they were a big name, and so but what's amazing is that so you go to a club with several hundred people go to a club, right, to listen to music, and you were like the warm up band for Badfinger, right?
Yeah.
So what amazes me is that so you have 200 or 300 people at a club. They're probably paying, I don't know, $5 each or $10 each because you've got
probably about
music.
$5 to $10, $15 max back then.
Amazing. So just to think that
it was more like about $5.
So usually during that brief period when you were with Badfingers, kind of like opening for them, they were getting $30 per day that they had to split 4 ways.
Yeah.
And did they also did you and Badfinger did the club give you any food? Throw you some burgers and fries, or that was never happening?
Not really. I mean, sometimes, but not really. A lot of the time, it was like we'd get a drink ticket, and that would be it.
Wow, amazing! And so this to get a feeling of this, they were the draw. You were just like in the something else. In the meantime, they were the big draw, and they were getting so scalped. $7.50 per day. I mean, when you were a kid, when you were like 10 or 12 years old, and you were playing block parties, you were making more than them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are the?
It was a very crazy time back then.
Yeah.
I mean,
there was a demand for music, man.
Oh, there was. But even back then, I mean, you could make more money, but I think part of the reason for making more money was simply because we also had a lower cost of living. Now musicians are pretty much paid the same kind of rate that we were paid like 30 years ago.
Yeah, this is give people context. This happened in like 1972.
Yeah,
right?
Between like 1970 and 72.
So just to give people an idea how much a car cost in those days, you could buy a new Ford Pinto, I think, for like $2,000.
Yeah. Well, the first car that I ever owned was a 1968 Mustang. When I got it, it had like 1,200 miles on it. So it wasn't brand new, and it cost like $1,200.
Amazing.
So you could send that.
And now
in
that same 1968 Mustang is like a collectible, and it's worth way more. I wish I still had it. Yeah, I wish I still had it.
Wow. Hey, Steve, listen, it's been great having you on the Quorum Radio. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And, best wishes to you. And this makes for an incredible interview.
Every day my mind is all around you. Looking out from my lonely room, day after day. Bring it home, baby, make it soon. I give my love to you. cheer